Well, hello there and welcome. I am so excited to be introducing a wonderful guest to you today. Her name is Collette Corcoran, and she's a dear sister of mine. She has her own mystery school called the Sacred Rose Temple, and she has literally devoted her life to the spiritual practice of studying and embodying the divine feminine on all of her faces. And Collette and I met many years ago at a Magdalene retreat. So we have both been weaving our ways with Mary Magdalene for many, many years. And I am excited to have you here today, my dear, because we're going to be diving into this extraordinary subject of Magdalene, sacred sexuality and the womb. So there is a lot that we're going to get into in this session. But before we get started on that conversation, I just want to ask you, Collette, to share a little bit about Mary Magdalene in your own life, like how she came into your life, how you became aware of her, and why you think that she is rising so deeply in the collective consciousness at this time. So let's jump in.
Wow, big question. So yes, I was introduced to Mary Magdalene at quite a young age, of probably preschool age, and at my Sunday school. So I was at a Sunday school with a story of Mother Mary and Jesus, and Mary Magdalene was told to us, and in a Christian lens, of course. And I quite liked her. Being a small, rebellious little girl that didn't like to do what she was told. And, I really liked the story of her, of this wayward woman, as she was called. And so she began to intrigue me more so than Mother Mary. Mother Mary was kind of like your typical holy sainted women, which was beautiful. But Magdalene intrigued me. And so I wanted to know more about Magdalene, and that was, I was able to do that during Sunday school, but through the lens of the Bible and what was being taught through the Christian church. So I left question marks there, grew up a little bit more, and then started to do womb work. And she came to me in full force in my womb. It started there with her. Why did Mary Magdalene come to me in my womb? I think because she is, as we know, the priestess of the womb. She's a sacred sexual priestess. And it was very clear to me that she was going to guide me through my womb from the onset. And so this was like really exciting for me. I realized that I would be able to be guided by Magdalene through her way, and not scripture, not a text or an opinion or a version of her, but through a direct experience that I had with her through my womb, which was mind-blowing. And I think the reason that she's coming back into our collective so strongly, that we see, I think every time I put my internet on, I see a woman involved with the Magdalene, working with the Magdalene, speaking of the Magdalene, is because I don't believe we're in any different time to when Magdalene was doing her work. I think the collective at the moment is under great tension. I think the collective is ushering women through its beautiful divine chaos, into stepping more deeply into a place of sovereignty, of compassion, of leadership, of us standing up as women and saying, actually, it's us that lead the way. And we've got something to share from this womb space that could change the face of the planet as we know it. And that's exactly what she did. She changed the face of the planet with her work with her beloved.
Yes, and yes. So I want to take us into this realm, because this is, for some, maybe quite controversial to be talking about Mary Magdalene and sexuality and her connection into the womb mysteries, into these 7 roses that you talk about. So I'd love to just have you share a bit more, Collette, because you're so deeply steeped in this as an embodied practice and as an internal mystery that you've been studying for so many years. When we talk about Magdalene as a sexual priestess, as an initiate of sexual magic and working through alchemy of sexuality, can you speak a little bit more into how you've come to that understanding and what we might know about her as that face of the Magdalene?
Yeah, so I think it started off with my own training in womb wisdom and through her guidance, that I was holding a lot of taboo in my womb with related to sex. Whenever we think of the word sex, or we say the word sex, the clouds of taboo gather around it. And so for my own individual exploration, and believe me, I'd been involved with like discovering Tantra in India through my yoga practices and yoga philosophy, I realized there was actually two separate schools, and that there was a sacred sexual school that had nothing to do with having sex, but had everything to do with sexual energy within my womb. And that was holy, and it was modest, and it was pure, and it was like a wildfire in me that wasn't expressed through fornication or whatever the church had said that was to me in those days. So I think I was really put off looking at Magdalene as a sexual being because of my own projections of what sexuality was, what sex was. And what she actually did when I started to work through the roses of my own womb and sacred sexual being was teach me that it was actually a purification, that it was a healing, that it was back to the purity of the very sexual act of the beloved that creates life on earth. And that to me blew my mind, and still blows my mind, how we as humans put such a huge projection on sex. Well, of course, because the whole collective has this projection on sex. But how, when we're talking in the framework of Magdalene and sacred sexuality, it's a complete inward journey into purification of the self, healing of the self.
I love that framing. And I'm going to tell you why I love it so much, because in my own studies of kind of the early Gnostic Christianity, or what I like to call the Rose Christianity, there is this term virginity, and virginity has come to mean not having sex, like, before marriage, right? That's how we've come to understand it. Are you a virgin? And yet in the Gnostic texts, they really talk about returning to our virginity, that we aren't born virgins, that we return to our virginity, our virgin state, our divine innocence, our purity. And it's actually through this exploration, which you're talking about, that we activate and awaken that divine spark within us, that is the landing of that purity or that innocence within us, of our divine union within self. And I think that's the other piece that's so powerful, is we often think about Tantra, and I think in the New Age, Tantra particularly being sex and having hot sex and great sex with another person. And yet when we come to the teachings of Mary Magdalene, it's really about the relationship between self and the inner beloved. It's the inner beloved. It's like, that's the place that's always caught my imagination so deeply, is how does one bring that lovemaking into the bridal chamber of our own being and live from that space? And I know that that's pretty much everything that you're talking about with all your roses sitting behind you.
Most certainly. Like, I couldn't explain it clearer myself, just that whole inner marriage, that whole, like, what does it mean to make love to the self? What does it mean to feel sexual energy that's a pure white flame? What does it mean to feel my whole body as this conduit, this vessel, this holy grail that actually holds the container for a divine union within, but a divine union outside of myself, and a divine union with others that could purify the world, change the world. And, I want to go back to that, what I believe as her in her sacred sexual priestess training, that I believe I received during my own initiations in my own sacred sexuality, and the training that she would have done on her own in preparation to even come into the ability to be able to even be in the energetic landscape of Jesus, and how that would have been a whole embodiment of work that we never heard, that we haven't heard the story of, that she would have gone through the initiations. And I know, and I've read quite a lot the same within the Gnostical framework of Mother Mary, also holding that lineage within her as well. And so the hard work that Magdalene would have done would have been on her own as a woman, as Jesus was working on his own self. And it was the combination of them coming together to enable what I believe was the sacred sexuality between the two of them that allowed his car body and his bar, so the life force with the eternal soul, to be delivered the Ankh, the key of life. And that Ankh is symbolic of the womb. It's the place of rebirth. It's of the place of resurrection. So we're reading all the symbols that we're getting through all the lineages we might read about Magdalene. We're getting the same symbology: the Ankh, the womb, the Holy Grail, the seals within the body. And I actually am grateful for the stories that I heard in Sunday school, because I don't think without those stories of the whore, of the outrageous woman, of the woman that was outed as the outsider, that I would have ever explored that. I think that story was fundamental for me to discover her in that sacred sexual way. And much like Eve, you know, I'm glad Eve bit the apple, and I'm glad Magdalene had this story around her, because this story has brought us as women really close to her.
Oh, goodness, said that better myself, sweetheart. I've really reflected on this as to why she's so prevalent. And I do really feel that she is holding the power of this story, the story that has really been the hallmark of the last 2,000 to 3,000 years of our collective history here in the West anyway, of this denigration of the feminine, of the fall of the feminine, of the suppression of the feminine, and her role as being the outsider, the quote unquote outsider, and really holding us, I think, in the reclamation and then coming to know our own power. The power is always there within us, but the fact that we need to reclaim it is because we've forgotten that we have that power. So I really want to just hold that with all of us for a moment who are here in this conversation, that we're being initiated right now through Collette, through her, to actually come to all the ways in which we've held our sexual power, our eros, in any kinds of shame or separation or denigration, that taboo that you named, because I think that's what you're pinpointing. So within that, I'm super curious, and I know we all are. I want to talk about these 7 roses, because I'm obsessed with roses, as you know, and the rose path, and the Magdalene rose is my particular area of fascination. And so that you have this this whole system of teaching that you've been developing over many years, I know, that works with the 7 seals of the 7 roses of the sexual activation and awakening of our power. So can you give us a little overview of what those are so we can get a framework? I'd love that.
I think that there's, from my experience in the work that I did on myself, and then the teachings that were received, it started with a 13 rose grail that taught me that there were certain access points in a female's body that needed to be healed first. So, you know, for example, Grail 1 was the breasts, and how the breasts are connected to the heart, and how we need to do healing within the breast and the mother, and all the things that we connect to the symbology of breasts and heart. And then secondly, we would go down to say like the mound. So the mound of the yoni, and what the mound means, and how we see mounds as sacred sites and of tombs. And so there's a whole map that came through me of those 13 roses that were really deeply about healing more than anything else. And I believe that's the initiation that we need to go through to be able to come into. And, you know, Magdalene wouldn't have just come into an exalted state and have been this prime priestess. She went through the devotion, she went through the teaching, she went through the initiations. So I believe in my school that there's 13 initiations through the body of healing. And then suddenly we become aware of these 7 seals. And, they're comparable to what would have been called the 7 demons that were released from her. And I don't believe they were demons at all. I think they were rites of passage. Whenever we go through a rite of passage, or wherever we're coming through a deep initiation, we all know this as women who do sacred work, that there's always something that comes in that needs addressing, something that comes in that we'd say, oh, I don't really want this to be here, because this is meant to be spiritual work and this is my sacred work and it's all meant to be glorious and fine and wonderful. But without that little order of chaos, and a light say order of chaos that comes in as we're initiated, we don't overcome the challenge that's trying to be shown to us. So I believe that these were challenges that were going on within the final initiations of her body. And they began with the seals. Now, I want to give everyone an experience of the seals through a little bit of a meditation. But they run through the body, and we know that the Eastern method, which is what I trained in my early yoga years, were the chakras. And I believe that all lineages actually match up and teach the same thing, whether that's a rose path, whether it's the tree of life. But there are certain energy spots within our body that hold sacred initiations, and so many sacred texts have shown us that. So what I was shown was that there was a map through the body of different coloured roses, and that these different roses held different frequencies and different little challenges that she was have met within him, because I think he was like her outer masculine. We say this in Jungian work that men that come in our lives are the outer masculine appearing to us, our own animus, and for men the opposite way around. So I think when Yeshua appeared before her, she was actually seeing her own inner masculine, and that reflection back from him, she was able to see exactly what needed to be moved within the 7 seals of the body. So I want to take people through that in a meditation.
Love it. I really would love you to do that, Collette. And the thing that's so fascinating to me, and I'll just say this because, we're talking about Magdalene, the woman, but we're also talking about Magdalene, a consciousness who is informing so many at this time. I literally feel like I am turning around in every moment and there's another voice of Magdalene coming forward. And it's extraordinary, the blossoming and quickening, I would say, of what's happening. And one of the pieces that I am aware of is that we're drinking from the same well. All right, we're all drinking from this well of knowledge, this collective unconscious knowledge base, and this whole 7 seals of the 7 roses. It's like this language of the rose is something that's so compelling to us. There is such a deep teaching inside the rose. So for you, all of you out there who've begun to create a connection with Magdalene, and you've been aware of the roses, or the way of the rose, or Venus, or Inanna's underworld journey, or this whole kind of lexicon that we're getting exposed to now, that we're remembering together, I just want to honor you as being part of her. Like, we're sitting here talking about this experience that we've been having, but I know if you're here, it's because you're being called to her within you too. Like, you are not separate to her. We are not in charge of her. She is living within every single one of us. And I kind of just want to say that, because it's easy when we're being the talking heads over here for you to go, oh, well, they know. No, this is your journey too. And what Colette's about to take you through is your journey of connection. So I just wanted to say that before I pass it back to you, Collette.
Yeah, and just to confirm, I'm here in France, and the symbol of the rose is very, very deeply entrenched within French culture, and all the symbology within that connected to the feminine and the Mary and the Magdalene. And it's funny you should say about drinking from the same well. According to folklore in France, that the waters here are entrenched with Magdalene's teachings. And when she came down into Saint-Baume, she transferred much of her knowledge into the water, knowing that we all drink from the same water. The water that is in the world has been reciprocated over and over and over again. She was like a genius to work. I'm going to put these codes within the water. And that is then available to every single body. I am available to everybody. And so I believe she is in the waters of our bodies. Yeah.
Oh.
And it's an activation, isn't it? All it is a matter of having a bit of consciousness towards that and an intention within yourself to reactivate that consciousness within your body. And there she is, boom, she's alive.
Oh, I have to just say one thing to that before you start with your your meditation, because I just returned from being in Avalon, being in modern day Glastonbury, that's also known as, the heart chakra of Avalon, where there is a deep, deep, deep connection into the Druid traditions and into the Magdalene traditions, and where those two interfaced. And again, the waters, I just brought back with me waters from the Red Spring and the White Spring, the Chalice Well and the White Spring. And the same feels like it's true. And actually this practice of praying and blessing the waters has been something that we as priestesses, as Grail maidens, as chalice bearers, have done throughout history, throughout the world. We know that our prayers and our intention is carried through the waters. And so I love that connection to the Magdalene having prayed upon the waters, and us remembering that our bodies are that water. And so, when we say she lives within us, we're not just using that metaphorically. It's an actual, it's actually in our biology is what I'm saying. So there's a biological standpoint here that's also being activated in remembrance. So let's dive into these 7 roses that we're going to meet, Collette, and go through it in an experiential way, which I think is so much more powerful than us talking about it.
I'm just going to invite you all just to take a big deep breath and just settle into your body, finding your seat and aligning your spine. And I want you to take a few deep breaths and allow yourself to sigh, allow the nervous system to just settle. And as you're taking those deep breaths, I want you to feel as though the breath is already seeking the womb. And as you breathe in, you can feel the womb respond to your conscious connection. And the womb is beginning to take up more space. You're allowing the rounding of your womb. You're not holding her back. You're taking the breath to your womb in a deep, ancient, and sacred remembrance of all the ways you've worked with her before, of all the ways you've worked with her in past lifetimes. And you're bringing that all together in this breath right now, allowing her to be full in this activation of remembrance. And all you need is your breath. That's your ticket to your womb as you breathe in and you feel the belly rounding and the womb rounding. She is feeling the expansion. She is asking for more breath. She is rounding. She is not too much. She is not taking up too much space. And she wants to fully round with each breath because she wants to expand with you. And as you are expanding in this breath, in this field of her, I want you to come into a sensuality of what she feels like, what her fragrance is, what the sound is she makes. If you were to touch the womb, the velvety redness of her, what would that feel like? And just to place your hands on her to feel where she lives in your body, to acknowledge the placement in the body. We're becoming full sensual awareness of her, calling in all our senses just to acknowledge the womb. And we are already in the activation of the first rose seal, the womb rose, the red rose. And I just want you to take 3 deep breaths here into that red, velvety consciousness of her. And just welcome this red womb rose. And as the rose opens and blooms in you, in your conscious awareness, you're going to now bring your breath into the second rose, which is the orange rose that sits just above the womb, where the seat of the soul is. And this orange rose holds on to all your beautiful emotions, the water, the emotions, deep, deep grief and ecstatic joy, anger, sacred rage. What emotions have we been blessed with this rose? All of them, the whole plethora, from the deep darkness to the greatest height of emotions, each polarity giving us the depth of experience of the other. And as you engage with your emotional body, you welcome this orange rose and you welcome every single one of your emotions, because emotions give birth to Shakti. How can we have Shakti without emotions? We can't. So as this orange rose blooms within your soul space just above the womb, this orange rose is already knocking on the door of the yellow rose, which is in the solar plexus. And you're feeling this yellow rose. Wow, the brightness of the fire rose, the yellow rose, the flaming rose, the rose of sovereignty, the rose of your deep power, the rose of your powerful ego, the ego that guides us, the ego that is strengthened, that knows its journey, the holy journey. But also the flame within the yellow rose of Shakti that deeply wants to travel now. And we awaken Shakti in the yellow rose. We allow an ego consciousness of Shakti. And the Shakti burns through the lower half of the body and takes us deeply into the heart space, into the pink rose, where we have our passion and our love and our deep compassion and mercy and the mother and the breasts, the giver of life, where we balance feminine and masculine energy, where Eros, Gamos, where sacred union happens. All within the pink rose, all within your reach. You breathe in the scent of the pink rose, and it already breathes up to the blue, the very blue of the blue rose. The truth, nothing but the truth, your truth, world truth, individual truth. The truth boils within our throat. We are in our truth. You are free to speak, sister. You are free to say whatever you like. Your words matter. Your words create our society, our culture, our community, our family. Choose your words wisely, but always speak them. Never hold them back. Keep this seal open as it pulls you to the violet rose that lives within the all-seeing eye. Let's go into the all-seeing eye that takes the priestess through to the other world, where the other world talks to us through visions and sights and dreams, incantations and visions that come through this rose seal that allows us an awakening to a world that we do not know, to the biggest mystery, the one we all seek. And that seeking in that rose opens you up to the gold, silver, platinum, the metallic rose at the very top of your head. You wear this like a crown. And this crown honors you as the sacred sexual priestess. This crown honors you as a Magdalene. This crown takes you to the higher consciousness, where you leave the mundane, where we come into the glorious, to where we ultimately seek God. We seek God. We go higher than we could ever imagine. We achieve miracles. We do what we would never expect human consciousness to be able to do. We birth the dead. We bring in new life like a magic wand. We create a different reality. And so feel this circuitry, feel the metallic rose raining down like a crown of silver, gold, platinum, all in activation of all the other roses. Feel from the head down the metallic rose. Feel the violet within that third eye. Feel the blue blooming at the throat. Feel the pink and its blossoming fragrance at the heart. Feel the fire of the yellow. Feel the orange, the soul, the emotions, and then go back down into that place of support, place of the feminine, the holy grail, the red rose of the womb. And I want you to just sit in that womb. Magdalene taught us that the womb was the holy grail, that the womb was the anchor, it's the key of life. All gnosis, all wisdom, all new ways to a better world live within the feminine womb. Everything you have, everything you need, all the world's wisdom lies there. And in your womb, your own ankh, your own womb key opens the door to your signature, to your calling, to what you are here to do if you can sit deeply and live from the womb. So stay there. This is God-given. This was your birthright. This red rose was always yours, always alive, always awake, waiting for you just to acknowledge her and accept the love and the power that lives within her.
Wow. I am so deliciously oriented to the living mystery of my own womb space. And so for all of us who are sitting in this rose garden of the Magdalene's teachings, I just want us to breathe that in, to breathe in the experience of being, I want to say, being enthroned in our wombs, which is really what I hear when you're speaking all of this enthronement where the crown is illuminated, that beautiful golden, platinum, silver, metallic rose lit up, and every rose in the garden of Mother blooming within us. And so thank you for that. You know, before we complete this time, I could talk to you for hours, Collette. I find this is, I mean, obviously any of us that are here are completely fascinated by this material. That's why we're here. That's why we're talking about it and really remembering what we're remembering through each other. And that's what I think is so amazing about the Magdalene is it's not one voice. It's not one person. It's many, many, many voices. And we're all weaving the threads that are being cohered into this new understanding of her teachings. So what I'd like to ask you is, from your perspective, what's the most important piece that Magdalene has to offer us as women at this time? Like, what really, if you could encapsulate that, what do you think her message, if you could speak it through you, is for us as women?
I think a message of inclusivity, of saying that every single woman has the ability to change this world. And, you know, her whole story of who she was and where she came from. She wasn't a prince, you know, she wasn't Cinderella. She wasn't in a high tower. She was a woman. And for me, that was the most profound message, that if she could do it, if she could change that, if she could commandeer that, then so can I. And you know, I was having a conversation with a woman the other day who had spoken to me about, you know, I adore the Magdalene, and there's so many attributes I see in her that are so amazing. And this was something I'd done with my own Jungian analysis, who'd said, share with me why you love the Magdalene so much. And I sort of wrote a list of all the things. And then he said, now look in a mirror and say all of those things that you are. And that, for me, was the most profound moment of understanding what she came to show us, because everything we believe about her, everything we feel inspired by her, we hold within us, or we wouldn't see it.
Oof. Say it, love. That's it. You know, that teaching, and we know that teaching has come down through into the, you know, the modern psychological movement, into the Jungian analysis. I mean, where did it come from? Where it came from was the Gnostic scriptures that Jung was reading, that he was interpreting, and that he was making a practice around. But Magdalene taught this. She was one who held the mirror. And in fact, in a lot of the artwork that you'll see of her throughout history, there'll be a symbol of a mirror. She'll be sitting in front of a mirror. And we have to ask, well, what is that mirror there for? That mirror is so that you can see through the eyes of your soul. That mirror is so that you can see who's here, and that the reflection is you that you're looking at. And that is what, whether you hate it or love it, it's you you're looking at. And that is what Jung has done for us, right? As a master of understanding that and bringing projection as a word into our vocabulary so we can even understand what that means. So I want to trace that back and say, you know, that comes from Magdalene's teachings, and probably from Kemet before that, and probably from Sumeria before that, and probably from Lemuria before that, right? That we've had these sacred tools available to us. So thank you for bringing that in and anchoring it, because it's the same thing. We're still after the same thing. After all these thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years of being here, the journey remains the same, which is, how can you know thyself? You know, that's that inscription in Delphi, know thyself. So, you know, she's saying the same thing, know thyself. Beautiful. I just want to bow to you, Collette, and all the teachings that you're bringing through, and all that you're rooting and grounding in so many different ways. And is there, just as we close today, is there anything you want to leave people with as something to contemplate, or beyond, you know thyself? Is there some other piece that you want to just sort of reiterate around what you believe to be so important at this time?
For me, the message is always, you know, the whole body is a whole map into us climbing the ladder into sacredness, into God consciousness, into the beloved. But, you know, for me with women, I think if they find home in the womb, there's just this sovereignty that lands in, and this wholeness, and this place of I'm complete, and I can hold myself within this sacred vessel. So I just want to say to our women, even if it's the only thing you do, or the deepest thing you do is just connect to your womb on a daily basis, and already just so much. That's what happened with me with the Magdalene. That's where she came in. I didn't have a teacher at the time. She was literally a force within my womb. And I know when I work with women, she's always activated there. So connect to your womb if you want to be guided by the Magdalene.
Oh, you know, and there's a story I have around that, and it's so fascinating to me, because I've had this experience too, Collette, of talking to many, many women, and my own journey. And suffice it to say, my own journey of when Magdalene really came into my womb space in a tremendously powerful way was when I was 46 years old and I had a miscarriage, and I went through that loss. And who was there with me in that terrifying dark mother moment was the Magdalene as the death maiden, as the Miraphor, as the death doula, who was holding that portal of death and rebirth open. And so I want to just honor all of us who here who may have had these experiences in our wombs, where there's been tremendous ecstasy or tremendous loss that have actually initiated her to begin to live through us. And there's much, much more that I could say about that. But I just wanted to weave that in because all of your stories are with us as we speak this, my loves. Even though we can't hear your voices, I want you to know we're honoring your stories because I know every one of you has a story here. So Collette, thank you so much. I just honor you, sweetheart, and the work that you're doing. Such a gift. And it's been so amazing to have you in this space. Thank you so much for being here. And to everyone else who's here with us, thank you for being with us. And we send you all a lot of love. And may you walk knowing that you have a womb of light within you. Blessed be.